Ingwa-Banashi. Lit. A Tale of Ingwa. Ingwa is a Japanese Buddhist term for evil karma, or the evil consequence of faults committed in a former state of existence. Perhaps the curious title of the narrative is best explained by the Buddhist teaching that the dead have power to injure the living only in consequence of evil actions committed by their victims in some former life. Both title and narrative may be found in the collection of weird stories entitled Hyaku Monogatari. The daimyo's wife was dying and knew that she was dying. She had not been able to leave her bed since the early autumn of the 10th Bonsei. It was now the 4th month of the 12th Bonsei, the year 1829 by Western counting, and the cherry trees were blossoming. She thought of the cherry trees in her garden and of the gladness of spring. She thought of her children. She thought of her husband's various concubines, especially the Lady Yukiko, 19 years old. "My dear wife," said the daimyo, "you have suffered very much for 3 long years. We have done all that we could to get you well, watching beside you night and day, praying for you, and often fasting for your sake. But in spite of our loving care, and in spite of the skill of our best physicians, it would now seem that the end of your life is not far off. Probably we shall sorrow more than you will sorrow because of your having to leave what the Buddha so truly termed this burning house of the world. I shall order to be performed, no matter what the cost, every religious rite that can serve you in regard to your next rebirth, and all of us will pray without ceasing for you, that you may not have to wander in the black space, but may quickly enter paradise and attain to Buddhahood." He spoke with the utmost tenderness, pressing her the while. Then, with eyelids closed, she answered him in a voice thin as the voice of an insect. "I am grateful, most grateful, for your kind words. Yes, it is true, as you say, that I have been sick for 3 long years, and that I have been treated with all possible care and affection. Why indeed should I turn away from the one true path at the very moment of my death? Perhaps to think of worldly matters at such a time is not right. But I have one last request to make. Only one. Call here to me the Lady Yukiko. You know that I love her like a sister. I want to speak to her about the affairs of this household." Yukiko came at the summons of the Lord, and, in obedience to a sign from him, knelt down beside the couch. The daimyo's wife opened her eyes and looked at Yukiko and spoke. "Ah, here is Yukiko. I am so pleased to see you, Yukiko. Come a little closer, so that you can hear me well. I am not able to speak loud. Yukiko, I am going to die. I hope that you will be faithful in all things to our dear Lord, for I want you to take my place when I am gone. I hope that you will always be loved by him, yes, even 100 times more than I have been, and that you will very soon be promoted to a higher rank and become his honored wife. And I beg of you always to cherish our dear Lord. Never allow another woman to rob you of his affection. This is what I wanted to say to you, dear Yukiko. Have you been able to understand?" "Oh, my dear lady," protested Yukiko. "Do not, I entreat you, say such strange things to me. You well know that I am of poor and mean condition. How could I ever dare to aspire to become the wife of our Lord?" "Nay, nay," returned the wife huskily. "This is not a time for words of ceremony. Let us speak only the truth to each other. After my death, you will certainly be promoted to a higher place, and I now assure you again that I wish you to become the wife of our Lord. Yes, I wish this, Yukiko, even more than I wish to become a Buddha. Ah, I had almost forgotten. I want you to do something for me, Yukiko. You know that in the garden there is a Esgor Yaezakura, which was brought here the year before last from Mount Yoshino in Yamato. I have been told that it is now in full bloom, and I wanted so much to see it in flower. In a little while I shall be dead. I must see that tree before I die. Now I wish you to carry me into the garden, at once, Yukiko, so that I can see it. Yes, upon your back, Yukiko. Take me upon your back. Yaezakura, ya no sakura, a variety of Japanese cherry tree that bears double blossoms. While thus asking, her voice had gradually become clear and strong, as if the intensity of the wish had given her new force. Then she suddenly burst into tears. Yukiko knelt motionless, not knowing what to do, but the Lord nodded assent. It is her last wish in this world, he said. She always loved cherry flowers, and I know that she wanted very much to see the Yamato tree in blossom. Come, my dear Yukiko, let her have her will. As a nurse turns her back to a child, that the child may cling to it, Yukiko offered her shoulders to the wife and said, Lady, I am ready. Please tell me how I best can help you. Why, this way, responded the dying woman, lifting herself with an almost superhuman effort by clinging to Yukiko's shoulders. But as she stood erect, she quickly slipped her thin hands down over the shoulders, under the robe, and clutched the breasts of the girl, and burst into a wicked laugh. I have my wish, she cried. I have my wish for the cherry bloom, but not the cherry bloom of the garden. I could not die before I got my wish. Now I have it. Oh, what a delight. In Japanese poetry and proverbial phraseology, the physical beauty of a woman is compared to the cherry flower, while feminine moral beauty is compared to the plum flower. And with these words, she fell forward upon the crouching girl and died. The attendants at once attempted to lift the body from Yukiko's shoulders and to lay it upon the bed. But, strange to say, this seemingly easy thing could not be done. The cold hands had attached themselves in some unaccountable way to the breasts of the girl, appeared to have grown into the quick flesh. Yukiko became senseless with fear and pain. Physicians were called. They could not understand what had taken place. By no ordinary methods could the hands of the dead woman be unfastened from the body of her victim. They so clung that any effort to remove them brought blood. This was not because the fingers held. It was because the flesh of the palms had united itself in some inexplicable manner to the flesh of the breasts. At that time, the most skillful physician in Yedo was a foreigner, a Dutch surgeon. It was decided to summon him. After a careful examination, he said that he could not understand the case, and that for the immediate relief of Yukiko there was nothing to be done except to cut the hands from the corpse. He declared that it would be dangerous to attempt to detach them from the breasts. His advice was accepted, and the hands were amputated at the wrists. But they remained clinging to the breasts, and there they soon darkened and dried up, like the hands of a person long dead. Yet this was only the beginning of the horror. Withered and bloodless though they seemed, those hands were not dead. At intervals they would stir, stealthily, like great gray spiders, and nightly thereafter, beginning always at the hour of the ox, they would clutch and compress and torture. Only at the hour of the tiger, the pain would cease. In ancient Japanese time, the hour of the ox was the special hour of ghosts. It began at 2 a.m. and lasted until 4 a.m., for the old Japanese hour was double the length of the modern hour. The hour of the tiger began at 4 a.m. Yukiko cut off her hair and became a mendicant nun, taking the religious name of Dasetsu. She had an Orhai mortuary tablet made bearing the Orscore kaimyo of her dead mistress, Mayo Koinden Chizanryo Fu Daishi, and this she carried about with her in all her wanderings, and every day before it, she humbly besought the dead for pardon, and performed a Buddhist service in order that the jealous spirit might find rest. But the evil karma that had rendered such an affliction possible could not soon be exhausted. Every night at the hour of the ox, the hands never failed to torture her during more than 17 years, according to the testimony of those persons to whom she last told her story, when she stopped for one evening at the house of Noguchi Dengozeyemon in the village of Tanaka in the district of Kawachi in the province of Shimotsuke. This was in the 3rd year of Kokwa, 1846. Thereafter, nothing On the wooded hill behind the house, Robert and I are looking for fairy rings. Robert is 8 years old, comely, and very wise. I am a little more than 7, and I reverence Robert. It is a glowing, glorious August day, and the warm air is filled with sharp, sweet scents of resin. We do not find any fairy rings, but we find a great many pine cones in the high grass. I tell Robert the old Welsh story of the man who went to sleep, unawares, inside a fairy ring, and so disappeared for 7 years, and would never eat or speak after his friends had delivered him from the enchantment. They eat nothing but the points of needles, you know, says Robert. Who? I ask. Goblins? Robert answers. This revelation leaves me dumb with astonishment and awe, but Robert suddenly cries out, "There is a harper! He is coming to the house!" And down the hill we run to hear the harper. But what a harper! Not like the hoary minstrels of the picture books. A swarthy, sturdy, unkempt vagabond with black, bold eyes under scowling black brows. More like a bricklayer than a bard, and his garments are corduroy. Wonder if he's going to sing in Welsh? Murmurs Robert. I feel too much disappointed to make any remarks. The harper poses his harp, a huge instrument, upon our doorstep, sets all the strings ringing with a sweep of his grimy fingers, clears his throat with a sort of angry growl, and begins. Believe me, if all those endearing young charms, which I gaze on so fondly today, the accent, the attitude, the voice, all fill me with repulsion unutterable, shock me with a new sensation of formidable vulgarity. I want to cry out loud, "You have no right to sing that song," for I have heard it sung by the lips of the dearest and fairest being in my little world, and that this rude, coarse man should dare to sing it vexes me like a mockery, angers me like an insolence, but only for a moment. With the utterance of the syllables "today," that deep, grim voice suddenly breaks into a quivering tenderness indescribable. Then, marvelously changing, it mellows into tones sonorous and rich as the bass of a great organ, while a sensation unlike anything ever felt before takes me by the throat. What witchcraft has he learned? What secret has he found, this scowling man of the road? Oh, is there anybody else in the whole world who can sing like that? And the form of the singer flickers and dims, and the house, and the lawn, and all visible shapes of things tremble and swim before me. Yet instinctively, I fear that man. I almost hate him, and I feel myself flushing with anger and shame because of his power to move me thus. He made you cry, Robert compassionately observes, to my further confusion, as the harper strides away, richer by a gift of 6pence taken without thanks. But I think he must be a gypsy. Gypsies are bad people, and they are wizards. Let us go back to the wood. We climb again to the pines, and there squat down upon the sun-flecked grass, and look over town and sea. But we do not play as before. The spell of the wizard is strong upon us both. Perhaps he is a goblin, I venture at last. Or a fairy? No, says Robert, only a gypsy. But that is nearly as bad. They steal children, you know. What shall we do if he comes up here? I gasp, in sudden terror at the lonesomeness of our situation. Oh, he wouldn't dare, answers Robert. Not by daylight, you know. Only yesterday, near the village of Takata, I noticed a flower which the Japanese call by nearly the same name as we do, Hi-Mawari, the sunward turning. And over the space of 40 years there thrilled back to me the voice of that wandering harper, as the sunflower turns on her god when he sets, the same look that she turned when he rose. Again I saw the sun-flecked shadows on that far Welsh hill, and Robert for a moment again stood beside me, with his girl's face and his curls of gold. We were looking for fairy rings, but all that existed of the real Robert must long ago have suffered a sea change into something rich and strange. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life The Goblin of Adachigahara. Long, long ago, there was a large plain called Adachigahara in the province of Mutsu in Japan. This place was said to be haunted by a cannibal goblin who took the form of an old woman. From time to time, many travelers disappeared and were never heard of more. And the old women round the charcoal braziers in the evenings, and the girls washing the household rice at the wells in the mornings, whispered dreadful stories of how the missing folk had been lured to the goblin's cottage and devoured. For the goblin lived only on human flesh. No one dared to venture near the haunted spot after sunset, and all those who could avoided it in the daytime, and travelers were warned of the dreaded place. One day, as the sun was setting, a priest came to the plain. He was a belated traveler, and his robe showed that he was a Buddhist pilgrim walking from shrine to shrine to pray for some blessing or to crave for forgiveness of sins. He had apparently lost his way, and as it was late, he met no one who could show him the road or warn him of the haunted spot. He had walked the whole day and was now tired and hungry, and the evenings were chilly, for it was late autumn, and he began to be very anxious to find some house where he could obtain a night's lodging. He found himself lost in the midst of the large plain, and looked about in vain for some sign of human habitation. At last, after wandering about for some hours, he saw a clump of trees in the distance, and through the trees he caught sight of the glimmer of a single ray of light. He exclaimed with joy, "Oh, surely that is some cottage where I can get a night's lodging." Keeping the light before his eyes, he dragged his weary, aching feet as quickly as he could towards the spot, and soon came to a miserable-looking little cottage. As he drew near, he saw that it was in a tumble-down condition. The bamboo fence was broken, and weeds and grass pushed their way through the gaps. The paper screens which serve as windows and doors in Japan were full of holes, and the posts of the house were bent with age and seemed scarcely able to support the old thatched roof. The hut was open, and by the light of an old lantern, an old woman sat industriously spinning. The pilgrim called to her across the bamboo fence and said, "Oh, Ba-san, old woman, good evening. I am a traveler. Please excuse me, but I have lost my way and do not know what to do, for I have nowhere to rest tonight. I beg you to be good enough to let me spend the night under your roof." The old woman, as soon as she heard herself spoken to, stopped spinning, rose from her seat, and approached the intruder. "I am very sorry for you. You must indeed be distressed to have lost your way in such a lonely spot so late at night. Unfortunately, I cannot put you up, for I have no bed to offer you, and no accommodation whatsoever for a guest in this poor place." "Oh, that does not matter," said the priest. "All I want is a shelter under some roof for the night, and if you will be good enough just to let me lie on the kitchen floor, I shall be grateful. I am too tired to walk further tonight, so I hope you will not refuse me. Otherwise, I shall have to sleep out on the cold plain." And in this way, he pressed the old woman to let him stay. She seemed very reluctant, but at last she said, "Very well, I will let you stay here. I can offer you a very poor welcome only, but come in now, and I will make a fire, for the night is cold." The pilgrim was only too glad to do as he was told. He took off his sandals and entered the hut. The old woman then brought some sticks of wood and lit the fire, and bade her guest draw near and warm himself. "You must be hungry after your long tramp," said the old woman. "I will go and cook some supper for you." She then went to the kitchen to cook some rice. After the priest had finished his supper, the old woman sat down by the fireplace, and they talked together for a long time. The pilgrim thought to himself that he had been very lucky to come across such a kind, hospitable old woman. At last the wood gave out, and as the fire died slowly down, he began to shiver with cold, just as he had done when he arrived. "I see you are cold," said the old woman. "I will go out and gather some wood, for we have used it all. You must stay and take care of the house while I am gone." "No, no," said the pilgrim. "Let me go instead, for you are old, and I cannot think of letting you go out to get wood for me this cold night." The old woman shook her head and said, "You must stay quietly here, for you are my guest." Then she left him and went out. In a minute she came back and said, "You must sit where you are and not move. And whatever happens, don't go near or look into the inner room. Now mind what I tell you. If you tell me not to go near the back room, of course I won't," said the priest, rather bewildered. The old woman then went out again, and the priest was left alone. The fire had died out, and the only light in the hut was that of a dim lantern. For the first time that night, he began to feel that he was in a weird place, and the old woman's words, "Whatever you do, don't peep into the back room," aroused his curiosity and his fear. What hidden thing could be in that room that she did not wish him to see? For some time, the remembrance of his promise to the old woman kept him still, but at last he could no longer resist his curiosity to peep into the forbidden place. He got up and began to move slowly towards the back room. Then the thought that the old woman would be very angry with him if he disobeyed her made him come back to his place by the fireside. As the minutes went slowly by and the old woman did not return, he began to feel more and more frightened and to wonder what dreadful secret was in the room behind him. He must find out. She will not know that I have looked unless I tell her. I will just have a peep before she comes back, said the man to himself. With these words, he got up on his feet, for he had been sitting all this time in Japanese fashion with his feet under him, and stealthily crept towards the forbidden spot. With trembling hands, he pushed back the sliding door and looked in. What he saw froze the blood in his veins. The room was full of dead men's bones, and the walls were splashed, and the floor was covered with human blood. In one corner, skull upon skull rose to the ceiling. In another was a heap of arm bones. In another, a heap of leg bones. The sickening smell made him faint. He fell backwards with horror, and for some time lay in a heap with fright on the floor, a pitiful sight. He trembled all over, and his teeth chattered, and he could hardly crawl away from the dreadful spot. "How horrible!" he cried out. "What awful den have I come to in my travels? May Buddha help me, or I'm lost. Is it possible that that kind old woman is really the cannibal goblin? When she comes back, she will show herself in her true character and eat me up at one mouthful." With these words, his strength came back to him, and snatching up his hat and staff, he rushed out of the house as fast as his legs could carry him. Out into the night he ran, his one thought to get as far as he could from the goblin's haunt. He had not gone far when he heard steps behind him and a voice crying, "Stop! Stop!" He ran on, redoubling his speed, pretending not to hear. As he ran, he heard the steps behind him come nearer and nearer, and at last he recognized the old woman's voice, which grew louder and louder as she came nearer. "Stop! Stop, you wicked man! Why did you look into the forbidden room?" The priest quite forgot how tired he was, and his feet flew over the ground faster than ever. Fear gave him strength, for he knew that if the goblin caught him, he would soon be one of her victims. With all his heart, he repeated the prayer to Buddha. "Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu." And after him rushed the dreadful old hag, her hair flying in the wind, and her face changing with rage into the demon that she was. In her hand she carried a large blood-stained knife, and she still shrieked after him, "Stop! Stop!" At last, when the priest felt he could run no more, the dawn broke, and with the darkness of night, the goblin vanished, and he was safe. The priest now knew that he had met the Goblin of Adachigahara, the story of whom he had often heard, but never believed to be true. He felt that he owed his wonderful escape to the protection of Buddha, to whom he had prayed for help. So he took out his rosary, and bowing his head as the sun rose, he said his prayers and made his thanksgiving earnestly. He then set forward for another part of the country, only Story of a Tengu. This story may be found in the curious old Japanese book called Anjikun Sho. The same legend has furnished the subject of an interesting unknown play called Anshkur Dae, the Great Assembly. In Japanese popular art, the Tengu are commonly represented either as winged men with beak-shaped noses or as birds of prey. There are different kinds of Tengu, but all are supposed to be mountain-haunting spirits, capable of assuming many forms, and occasionally appearing as crows, vultures, or eagles. Buddhism appears to class the Tengu among the Marakayikas. In the days of the Emperor Go-Reisei, there was a holy priest living in the temple of Saito on the mountain called Hyeizan, near Kyoto. One summer day, this good priest, after a visit to the city, was returning to his temple by way of Kita no Oji, when he saw some boys ill-treating a kite. They had caught the bird in a snare and were beating it with sticks. "Oh, the poor creature," compassionately exclaimed the priest. "Why do you torment it so, children?" One of the boys made answer, "We want to kill it to get the feathers." Moved by pity, the priest persuaded the boys to let him have the kite in exchange for a fan that he was carrying, and he set the bird free. It had not been seriously hurt and was able to fly away. Happy at having performed this Buddhist act of merit, the priest then resumed his walk. He had not proceeded very far when he saw a strange monk come out of a bamboo grove by the roadside and hasten towards him. The monk respectfully saluted him and said, "Sir, through your compassionate kindness my life has been saved, and I now desire to express my gratitude in a fitting manner." Astonished at hearing himself thus addressed, the priest replied, "Really, I cannot remember to have ever seen you before. Please tell me who you are." "It is not wonderful that you cannot recognize me in this form," returned the monk. "I am the kite that those cruel boys were tormenting at Kita no Oji. You saved my life, and there is nothing in this world more precious than life. So I now wish to return your kindness in some way or other. If there be anything that you would like to have, or to know, or to see, anything that I can do for you, in short, please to tell me. For as I happen to possess, in a small degree, the 6 supernatural powers, I am able to gratify almost any wish that you can express." On hearing these words, the priest knew that he was speaking with a Tengu, and he frankly made answer, "My friend, I have long ceased to care for the things of this world. I am now 70 years of age. Neither fame nor pleasure has any attraction for me. I feel anxious only about my future birth, but as that is a matter in which no one can help me, it were useless to ask about it. Really, I can think of but one thing worth wishing for. It has been my lifelong regret that I was not in India in the time of the Lord Buddha, and could not attend the great assembly on the holy mountain Gridhrakutta. Never a day passes in which this regret does not come to me, in the hour of morning or of evening prayer. Ah, my friend, if it were possible to conquer time and space, like the Bodhisattvas, so that I could look upon that marvelous assembly, how happy should I be?" "Why," the Tengu exclaimed, "that pious wish of yours can easily be satisfied. I perfectly well remember the assembly on the Vulture Peak, and I can cause everything that happened there to reappear before you exactly as it occurred. It is our greatest delight to represent such holy matters. Come this way with me." And the priest suffered himself to be led to a place among pines on the slope of a hill. "Now," said the Tengu, "you have only to wait here for a while, with your eyes shut. Do not open them until you hear the voice of the Buddha preaching the law. Then you can look. But when you see the appearance of the Buddha, you must not allow your devout feelings to influence you in any way. You must not bow down, nor pray, nor utter any such exclamation as, 'Even so, Lord,' or 'Thou Blessed One.' You must not speak at all. Should you make even the least sign of reverence, something very unfortunate might happen to me." The priest gladly promised to follow these injunctions, and the Tengu hurried away as if to prepare the spectacle. The day waned and passed, and the darkness came. But the old priest waited patiently beneath a tree, keeping his eyes closed. At last, a voice suddenly resounded above him, a wonderful voice, deep and clear like the pealing of a mighty bell, the voice of the Buddha Sakyamuni proclaiming the perfect way. Then the priest, opening his eyes in a great radiance, perceived that all things had been changed. The place was indeed the Vulture Peak, the holy Indian mountain Gridrakuta, and the time was the time of the Sutra of the Lotus of the Good Law. Now there were no pines about him, but strange shining trees made of the 7 precious substances, with foliage and fruit of gems, and the ground was covered with mandarava and manjushika flowers showered from heaven, and the night was filled with fragrance and splendor and the sweetness of the great voice. And in mid-air, shining as a moon above the world, the priest beheld the Blessed One seated upon the lion throne, with Samantabhadra at his right hand and Manjusri at his left, and before them assembled, immeasurably spreading into space like a flood of stars, the hosts of the Mahasattvas and the Bodhisattvas with their countless following, gods, demons, nagas, goblins, men, and beings not human. Sariputra he saw, and Kasyapa, and Ananda, with all the disciples of the Tathagata, and the kings of the Devas, and the kings of the 4 directions, like pillars of fire, and the great dragon kings, and the Gandharvas and Garudas, and the gods of the sun and the moon and the wind, and the shining myriads of Brahma's heaven, and incomparably further than even the measureless circling of the glory of these he saw, made visible by a single ray of light that shot from the forehead of the Blessed One to pierce beyond uttermost time, the 1800,000 Buddha fields of the eastern quarter with all their habitants, and the beings in each of the 6 states of existence, and even the shapes of the Buddhas extinct that had entered into nirvana. These and all the gods and all the demons he saw bow down before the lion throne, and he heard that multitude incalculable of beings praising the Sutra of the Lotus of the Good Law, like the roar of a sea before the Lord. Then forgetting utterly his pledge, foolishly dreaming that he stood in the very presence of the very Buddha, he cast himself down in worship with tears of love and thanksgiving, crying out with a loud voice, "O thou Blessed One!" Instantly, with a shock, as of earthquake, the stupendous spectacle disappeared, and the priest found himself alone in the dark, kneeling upon the grass of the mountainside. Then a sadness unspeakable fell upon him because of the loss of the vision, and because of the thoughtlessness that had caused him to break his word. As he sorrowfully turned his steps homeward, the goblin monk once more appeared before him, and said to him in tones of reproach and pain, "Because you did not keep the promise which you made to me, and heedlessly allowed your feelings to overcome you, the Gohotendo, who is the guardian of the doctrine, swooped down suddenly from heaven upon us, and smote us in great anger, crying out, 'How do ye dare thus to deceive a pious person?' Then the other monks whom I had assembled all fled in fear. As for myself, one of my wings has been broken, so that now I cannot fly." And with these words, the Tengu There was once a very pious and learned priest called Shoku Shonen, who lived in the province of Harima. For many years he meditated daily upon the chapter of Fugen-Bosatsu in the Sutra of the Lotus of the Good Law, and he used to pray every morning and evening that he might at some time be permitted to behold Fugen-Bosatsu as a living presence, and in the form described in the holy text. One evening, while he was reciting the sutra, drowsiness overcame him, and he fell asleep leaning upon his kyosoku. Then he dreamed, and in his dream a voice told him that, in order to see Fugen-Bosatsu, he must go to the house of a certain courtesan, known as the Yujo no Choja, who lived in the town of Kanzaki. Immediately upon awakening, he resolved to go to Kanzaki, and making all possible haste, he reached the town by the evening of the next day. When he entered the house of the Yujo, he found many persons already there assembled, mostly young men of the capital, who had been attracted to Kanzaki by the fame of the woman's beauty. They were feasting and drinking. And the Yujo was playing a small hand drum, Izuzumi Istavi, which she used very skillfully, and singing a song. The song which she sang was an old Japanese song about a famous shrine in the town of Murozumi, and the words were these. Within the sacred water tank of Murozumi in Suwo, even though no wind be blowing, the surface of the water is always rippling. The sweetness of the voice filled everybody with surprise and delight, as the priest, who had taken a place apart, listened and wondered. The girl suddenly fixed her eyes upon him, and in the same instant, he saw her form change into the form of Fugen-Bosatsu, emitting from her brow a beam of light that seemed to pierce beyond the limits of the universe, and riding a snow-white elephant with 6 tusks. And still she sang, but the song also was now transformed, and the words came thus to the ears of the priest. On the vast sea of cessation, though the winds of the 6 desires and of the 5 corruptions never blow, yet the surface of that deep is always covered with the billowings of attainment to the reality in itself. Dazzled by the divine ray, the priest closed his eyes, but through their lids he still distinctly saw the vision. When he opened them again, it was gone. He saw only the girl with her hand drum and heard only the song about the water of Murozumi. But he found that as often as he shut his eyes, he could see Fugen-Bosatsu on the 6-tusked elephant and could hear the mystic song of the sea of cessation. The other persons present saw only the core Yujo. They had not beheld the manifestation. Then the singer suddenly disappeared from the banquet room. None could say when or how. From that moment the revelry ceased, and gloom took the place of joy. After having waited and sought for the girl to no purpose, the company dispersed in great sorrow. Last of all, the priest departed, bewildered by the emotions of the evening. But scarcely had he passed beyond the gate, when the Huyujo appeared before him and said, "Friend, do not speak yet to any one of what you have seen this night." And with these words she vanished away, leaving the air filled with a delicious fragrance. The monk by whom the foregoing legend was recorded comments upon it thus: "The condition of a Yujo is low and miserable, since she is condemned to serve the lusts of men. Who therefore could imagine that such a woman might be the Nirmanakaya or incarnation of a bodhisattva?" But we must remember that the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas may appear in this world in countless different forms, choosing, for the purpose of their divine compassion, even the most humble or contemptible shapes, when such shapes can serve them to lead men into the true path and to save them from the peril. There was a man named Toaraya Totaro who lived in the province of Omi. His house was situated on the shore of Lake Biwa, not far from the famous temple called Ishiyamadera. He had some property and lived in comfort, but at the age of 29, he was still unmarried. His greatest ambition was to marry a very beautiful woman, and he had not been able to find a girl to his liking. One day, as he was passing over the long bridge of Seda, he saw a strange being crouching close to the parapet. The body of this being resembled the body of a man, but was black as ink. Its face was like the face of a demon. Its eyes were green as emeralds, and its beard was like the beard of a dragon. Totaro was at first very much startled, but the green eyes looked at him so gently that after a moment's hesitation, he ventured to question the creature. Then it answered him, saying, "I am a Samebito, a sharkman of the sea, and until a short time ago I was in the service of the 8 great dragon kings as a subordinate officer in the Dragon Palace. But because of a small fault which I committed, I was dismissed from the Dragon Palace, and also banished from the sea. Since then I have been wandering about here, unable to get any food, or even a place to lie down. If you can feel any pity for me, do, I beseech you, help me to find a shelter, and let me have something to eat." This petition was uttered in so plaintive a tone and in so humble a manner that Totaro's heart was touched. "Come with me," he said. "There is in my garden a large and deep pond where you may live as long as you wish, and I will give you plenty to eat." The score Samebito followed Totaro home and appeared to be much pleased with the pond. Thereafter, for nearly half a year, this strange guest dwelt in the pond and was every day supplied by Totaro with such food as sea creatures like. From this point of the original narrative, the shark man is referred to not as a monster, but as a sympathetic person of the male sex. Now, in the 7th month of the same year, there was a female pilgrimage in Yonin mode to the great Buddhist temple called Midera in the neighboring town of Otsu, and Totaro went to Otsu to attend the festival. Among the multitude of women and young girls there assembled, he observed a person of extraordinary beauty. She seemed about 16 years old. Her face was fair and pure as snow, and the loveliness of her lips assured the beholder that their every utterance would sound as sweet as the voice of a nightingale singing upon a plum tree. Totaro fell in love with her at sight. When she left the temple, he followed her at a respectful distance and discovered that she and her mother were staying for a few days at a certain house in the neighboring village of Seida. By questioning some of the village folk, he was able also to learn that her name was Tamana, that she was unmarried, and that her family appeared to be unwilling that she should marry a man of ordinary rank, for they demanded as a betrothal gift a casket containing 10,000 jewels. Totaro returned home very much dismayed by this information. The more that he thought about the strange betrothal gift demanded by the girl's parents, the more he felt that he could never expect to obtain her for his wife. Even supposing that there were as many as 10,000 jewels in the whole country, only a great prince could hope to procure them. But not even for a single hour could Totaro banish from his mind the memory of that beautiful being. It haunted him so that he could neither eat nor sleep, and it seemed to become more and more vivid as the days went by. And at last he became ill, so ill that he could not lift his head from the pillow. Then he sent for a doctor. The doctor, after having made a careful examination, uttered an exclamation of surprise. "Almost any kind of sickness," he said, "can be cured by proper medical treatment, except the sickness of love. Your ailment is evidently love sickness. There is no cure for it. In ancient times, Roya o Hakuyo died of that sickness, and you must prepare yourself to die as he died." So saying, the doctor went away, without even giving any medicine to Totaro. About this time, the shark man that was living in the garden pond heard of his master's sickness and came into the house to wait upon Totaro, and he tended him with the utmost affection both by day and by night. But he did not know either the cause or the serious nature of the sickness until nearly a week later, when Totaro, thinking himself about to die, uttered these words of farewell. "I suppose that I have had the pleasure of caring for you thus long because of some relation that grew up between us in a former state of existence. But now I am very sick indeed, and every day my sickness becomes worse, and my life is like the morning dew which passes away before the setting of the sun. For your sake, therefore, I am troubled in mind. Your existence has depended upon my care, and I fear that there will be no one to care for you and to feed you when I am dead. My poor friend, alas, our hopes and our wishes are always disappointed in this unhappy world." No sooner had Totaro spoken these words than the Samebito uttered a strange wild cry of pain and began to weep bitterly. And as he wept, great tears of blood streamed from his green eyes and rolled down his black cheeks and dripped upon the floor. And falling, they were blood. But having fallen, they became hard and bright and beautiful, became jewels of inestimable price, rubies splendid as crimson fire. For when men of the sea weep, their tears become precious stones. Then Totaro, beholding this marvel, was so amazed and overjoyed that his strength returned to him. He sprang from his bed and began to pick up and to count the tears of the shark man, crying out the while, "My sickness is cured! I shall live! I shall live!" Therewith, the shark man, greatly astonished, ceased to weep, and asked Totaro to explain this wonderful cure. And Totaro told him about the young person seen at Madeira, and about the extraordinary marriage gift demanded by her family. "As I felt sure," added Totaro, "that I should never be able to get 10,000 jewels, I supposed that my suit would be hopeless. Then I became very unhappy, and at last fell sick. But now, because of your generous weeping, I have many precious stones, and I think that I shall be able to marry that girl. Only, there are not yet quite enough stones, and I beg that you will be good enough to weep a little more, so as to make up the full number required." But at this request, the Samebito shook his head, and answered in a tone of surprise and of reproach, "Do you think that I am like a harlot, able to weep whenever I wish? Oh no! Harlots shed tears in order to deceive men, but creatures of the sea cannot weep without feeling real sorrow. I wept for you because of the true grief that I felt in my heart at the thought that you were going to die. But now, I cannot weep for you, because you have told me that your sickness is cured." "Then what am I to do?" plaintively asked Totaro. "Unless I can get 10,000 jewels, I cannot marry the girl." The Samebito remained for a little while silent, as if thinking. Then he said, "Listen. Today I cannot possibly weep anymore. But tomorrow let us go together to the long bridge of Seda, taking with us some wine and some fish. We can rest for a time on the bridge, and while we are drinking the wine and eating the fish, I shall gaze in the direction of the Dragon Palace, and try, by thinking of the happy days that I spent there, to make myself feel homesick, so that I can weep." Totaro joyfully assented. Next morning, the two, taking plenty of wine and fish with them, went to the Seda Bridge and rested there and feasted. After having drunk a great deal of wine, the Samebito began to gaze in the direction of the Dragon Kingdom and to think about the past. And gradually, under the softening influence of the wine, the memory of happier days filled his heart with sorrow, and the pain of homesickness came upon him, so that he could weep profusely, and the great red tears that he shed fell upon the bridge in a shower of rubies. And Totaro gathered them as they fell, and put them into a casket, and counted them until he had counted the full number of 10,000. Then he uttered a shout of joy. Almost in the same moment, from far away over the lake, a delightful sound of music was heard, and there appeared in the offing, slowly rising from the waters, like some fabric of cloud, a palace of the color of the setting sun. At once the Samebito sprang upon the parapet of the bridge and looked and laughed for joy. Then, turning to Totaro, he said, "There must have been a general amnesty proclaimed in the Dragon Realm. The kings are calling me. So now I must bid you farewell. I am happy to have had one chance of befriending you in return for your goodness to me." With these words, he leaped from the bridge, and no man ever saw him again. But Totaro presented the casket of red jewels to the parents of Tamana. Riki-Baka. His name was Riki, signifying strength, but the people called him Riki the Simple, or Riki the Fool, Riki-Baka, because he had been born into perpetual childhood. For the same reason, they were kind to him, even when he set a house on fire by putting a lighted match to a mosquito curtain, and clapped his hands for joy to see the blaze. At 16 years, he was a tall, strong lad, but in mind he remained always at the happy age of 2, and therefore continued to play with very small children. The bigger children of the neighborhood, from 4 to 7 years old, did not care to play with him, because he could not learn their songs and games. His favorite toy was a broomstick, which he used as a hobby horse, And for hours at a time, he would ride on that broomstick up and down the slope in front of my house with amazing peals of laughter. But at last, he became troublesome by reason of his noise, and I had to tell him that he must find another playground. He bowed submissively and then went off, sorrowfully trailing his broomstick behind him. Gentle at all times and perfectly harmless if allowed no chance to play with fire, he seldom gave anybody cause for complaint. His relation to the life of our street was scarcely more than that of a dog or a chicken, and when he finally disappeared, I did not miss him. Months and months passed by before anything happened to remind me of Riki. What has become of Riki? I then asked the old woodcutter who supplies our neighborhood with fuel. I remembered that Riki had often helped him to carry his bundles. Riki-Baka? Answered the old man. Ah, Riki is dead. Poor fellow. Yes, he died nearly a year ago, very suddenly. The doctors said that he had some disease of the brain, and there is a strange story now about that poor Riki. When Riki died, his mother wrote his name, Riki-Baka, in the palm of his left hand, putting Riki in the Chinese character, and Baka in _kana, 1. And she repeated many prayers for him, prayers that he might be reborn into some more happy condition. Now, about 3 months ago, in the honorable residence of Nanigashi-sama, 2, in Kojimachi, 3, a boy was born with characters on the palm of his left hand, and the characters were quite plain to read, Riki-Baka. So the people of that house knew that the birth must have happened in answer to somebody's prayer, and they caused inquiry to be made everywhere. At last, a vegetable seller brought word to them that there used to be a simple lad called Riki-Baka living in the Ushigome quarter, and that he had died during the last autumn. And they sent 2 men servants to look for the mother of Riki. Those servants found the mother of Riki and told her what had happened, and she was glad exceedingly, for that Nanigashi house is a very rich and famous house. But the servants said that the family of Nanigashi-sama were very angry about the word Baka on the child's hand. And where is your Riki buried? The servants asked. He is buried in the cemetery of Zendoji, she told them. Please to give us some of the clay of his grave, they requested. So she went with them to the temple Zendoji and showed them Riki's grave, and they took some of the grave clay away with them, wrapped up in a furoshiki and her skirt. They gave Riki's mother some money, 10 yen. 4. But what did they want with that clay? I inquired. Well, the old man answered, you know that it would not do to let the child grow up with that name on his hand, and there is no other means of removing characters that come in that way upon the body of a child. You must rub the skin with clay taken from the grave of the body of the There was a falconer and hunter named Sonjo, who lived in the district called Tamura no Go of the province of Mutsu. One day he went out hunting and could not find any game, but on his way home at a place called Akanuma, he perceived a pair of Oshidori, mandarin ducks, swimming together in a river that he was about to cross. To kill Oshidori is not good, but Sonjo happened to be very hungry, and he shot at the pair. His arrow pierced the male. The female escaped into the rushes of the further shore and disappeared. Sonjo took the dead bird home and cooked it. That night he dreamed a dreary dream. It seemed to him that a beautiful woman came into his room and stood by his pillow and began to weep. So bitterly did she weep that Sonjo felt as if his heart were being torn out while he listened. And the woman cried to him, "Why? Oh, why did you kill him? Of what wrong was he guilty? At Akanuma, we were so happy together, and you killed him. What harm did he ever do you? Do you even know what you have done? Oh, do you know what a cruel, what a wicked thing you have done? Me too you have killed, for I will not live without my husband. Only to tell you this I came." Then again she wept aloud, so bitterly that the voice of her crying pierced into the marrow of the listener's bones, and she sobbed out the words of this poem. Hai kurureba, sasuishi mono wo, akanuma no, makomo, no kure no, itori ne zo uki. At the coming of twilight, I invited him to return with me, now to sleep alone in the shadow of the rushes of Akanuma. Ah, what misery unspeakable. And after having uttered these verses, she exclaimed, Ah, you do not know. You cannot know what you have done. But tomorrow, when you go to Akanuma, you will see, you will see. So saying, and weeping very piteously, she went away. When Sanjo awoke in the morning, this dream remained so vivid in his mind that he was greatly troubled. He remembered the words, But tomorrow, when you go to Akanuma, you will see, you will see. And he resolved to go there at once, that he might learn whether his dream was anything more than a dream. So he went to Akanuma, and there, when he came to the riverbank, he saw the female Oshidori swimming alone. In the same moment, the bird perceived Sanjo, but instead of trying to escape, she swam straight towards him, looking at him the while in a strange, fixed way. Then, with her beak, she suddenly tore open her own body and died before the hunter's eyes. Sanjo shaved his head and became Shiryō. On the death of Nomoto Yajiamon, a daikwan in the province of Ikizen, his clerks entered into a conspiracy to defraud the family of their late master. Under pretext of paying some of the daikwan's debts, they took possession of all the money, valuables, and furniture in his house, and they furthermore prepared a false report to make it appear that he had unlawfully contracted obligations exceeding the worth of his estate. This false report they sent to the Saisho, and the Saisho thereupon issued a decree banishing the widow and the children of Nomoto from the province of Ikizen. For in those times the family of a daikwan were held in part responsible, even after his death, for any malfeasance proved against him. But at the moment when the order of banishment was officially announced to the widow of Nomoto, a strange thing happened to a maidservant in the house. She was seized with convulsions and shudderings, like a person possessed. And when the convulsions passed, she rose up and cried out to the officers of the Saisho and to the clerks of her late master, Now listen to me. It is not a girl who is speaking to you. It is I, Yajiamon, Nomoto Yajiamon, returned to you from the dead. In grief and great anger do I return. Grief and anger caused me by those in whom I vainly put my trust. O you infamous and ungrateful clerks, how could you so forget the favors bestowed upon you, as thus to ruin my property and to disgrace my name? Here now, in my presence, let the accounts of my office and of my house be made, and let a servant be sent for the books of the Metsuke, so that the estimates may be compared. As the maid uttered these words, all present were filled with astonishment, for her voice and her manner were the voice and the manner of Nomoto Yajiamon. The guilty clerks turned pale, but the representatives of the Saisho at once commanded that the desire expressed by the girl should be fully granted. All the account books of the office were promptly placed before her, and the books of the Metsuke were brought in, and she began the reckoning. Without making a single error, she went through all the accounts, writing down the totals and correcting every false entry. And her writing, as she wrote, was seen to be the very writing of Nomoto Yajiamon. Now this re-examination of the accounts not only proved that there had been no indebtedness, but also showed that there had been a surplus in the office treasury at the time of the daikwan's death. Thus the villainy of the clerks became manifest. And when all the accounts had been made up, the girl said, speaking in the very voice of Nomoto Yajiamon, Now everything is finished, and I can do nothing further in the matter. So I shall go back to the place from which I came. Then she lay down and instantly fell asleep, and she slept like a dead person during 2 days and 2 nights. For great weariness and deep sleep fall upon the possessed, when the possessing spirit passes from them. When she again awoke, her voice and her manner were the voice and the manner of a young girl, and neither at that time nor at any time after could she remember what had happened while she was possessed by the ghost or Nomoto Yajiemon. A report of this event was promptly sent to the Saisho, and the Saisho, in consequence, not only revoked the order of banishment, but made large gifts to the family of the Daikwan. Later on, various posthumous honors were conferred upon Nomoto Yajiemon, and for many subsequent years, his house was favored by the government, so that it prospered greatly, but the clerks received the punishment which they deserved. Footnote 1. The term Shiryō, dead ghost, that is to say, the ghost of a dead person, is used in contradistinction to the term Uguryo, signifying the apparition of a living person. Yurei-Ugurwe is a more generic name for ghosts of any sort. Footnote 2. A Daikwan Unscore was a district governor under the direct control of the shogunate. His functions were both civil and judicial. Footnote 3. The Haiso was a high official of the shogunate, with duties corresponding to those of a prime minister. Footnote 4. The Usgor Metsuke Dusgor was a government official charged with the duty of keeping watch over the conduct of local governors or district judges, and of inspecting Ubazakura. 300 years ago, in the village called Asamimura, in the district called Onsengori, in the province of Ayo, there lived a good man named Tokubei. This Tokubei was the richest person in the district, and the Koromuraosa, or headman of the village. In most matters he was fortunate, but he reached the age of 40 without knowing the happiness of becoming a father. Therefore he and his wife, in the affliction of their childlessness, addressed many prayers to the divinity Fudo Mao, who had a famous temple called Saihoji in Asamimura. At last their prayers were heard. The wife of Tokubei gave birth to a daughter. The child was very pretty, and she received the name of Tsuyu. As the mother's milk was deficient, a milk nurse called Osode was hired for the little one. Otsuyu grew up to be a very beautiful girl, but at the age of 15 she fell sick, and the doctors thought that she was going to die. In that time, the nurse Osode, who loved Otsuyu with a real mother's love, went to the temple Saioji and fervently prayed to Fudo-sama on behalf of the girl. Every day, for 21 days, she went to the temple and prayed, and at the end of that time, Otsuyu suddenly and completely recovered. Then there was great rejoicing in the house of Tokubei, and he gave a feast to all his friends in celebration of the happy event. But on the night of the feast, the nurse Osode was suddenly taken ill, and on the following morning, the doctor, who had been summoned to attend her, announced that she was dying. Then the family, in great sorrow, gathered about her bed to bid her farewell. But she said to them, "It is time that I should tell you something which you do not know. My prayer has been heard. I besought Fudo-sama that I might be permitted to die in the place of Otsuyu, and this great favor has been granted me. Therefore you must not grieve about my death. But I have one request to make. I promised Fudo-sama that I would have a cherry tree planted in the garden of Saioji for a thank offering and a commemoration. Now I shall not be able myself to plant the tree there, so I must beg that you will fulfill that vow for me. Goodbye, dear friends, and remember that I was happy to die for Otsuyu's sake." After the funeral of Osode, a young cherry tree, the finest that could be found, was planted in the garden of Saihoji by the parents of Otsuyu. The tree grew and flourished, and on the 16th day of the second month of the following year, the anniversary of Osode's death, it blossomed in a wonderful way. So it continued to blossom for 254 years, always upon the 16th day of the second month, and its flowers, pink and white, were like the nipples of a woman's breasts, bedewed with milk. And the people called it Ubazakura, the cherry tree of the Story of Chūgorō. A long time ago, there lived in the Kuishikawa quarter of Yedo a hatamoto named Suzuki, whose yashiki was situated on the bank of the Yedo-gawa, not far from the bridge called Nakanohashi. And among the retainers of this Suzuki, there was an oshigaru named Chūgorō. Chūgorō was a handsome lad, very amiable and clever, and much liked by his comrades. For several years, Chūgorō remained in the service of Suzuki, conducting himself so well that no fault was found with him. But at last, the other Kora discovered that Chūgorō was in the habit of leaving the yashiki every night by way of the garden and staying out until a little before dawn. At first, they said nothing to him about this strange behavior, for his absences did not interfere with any regular duty and were supposed to be caused by some love affair. But after a time, he began to look pale and weak, and his comrades, suspecting some serious folly, decided to interfere. Therefore, one evening, just as he was about to steal away from the house, an elderly retainer called him aside and said, "Chūgorō, my lad, we know that you go out every night and stay away until early morning, and we have observed that you are looking unwell. We fear that you are keeping bad company and injuring your health, and unless you can give a good reason for your conduct, we shall think that it is our duty to report this matter to the chief officer. In any case, since we are your comrades and friends, it is but right that we should know why you go out at night, contrary to the custom of this house." Chūgorō appeared to be very much embarrassed and alarmed by these words, but after a short silence, he passed into the garden, followed by his comrade. When the two found themselves well out of hearing of the rest, Chūgorō stopped and said, "I will now tell you everything, but I must entreat you to keep my secret. If you repeat what I tell you, some great misfortune may befall me." It was in the early part of last spring, about 5 months ago, that I first began to go out at night on account of a love affair. One evening, when I was returning to the yashiki after a visit to my parents, I saw a woman standing by the riverside, not far from the main gateway. She was dressed like a person of high rank, and I thought it strange that a woman so finely dressed should be standing there alone at such an hour. But I did not think that I had any right to question her, and I was about to pass her by without speaking when she stepped forward and pulled me by the sleeve. Then I saw that she was very young and handsome. "Will you not walk with me as far as the bridge?" she said. "I have something to tell you." Her voice was very soft and pleasant, and she smiled as she spoke, and her smile was hard to resist. So I walked with her toward the bridge, and on the way she told me that she had often seen me going in and out of the yashiki, and had taken a fancy to me. "I wish to have you for my husband," she said. "If you can like me, we shall be able to make each other very happy." I did not know how to answer her, but I thought her very charming. As we neared the bridge, she pulled my sleeve again and led me down the bank to the very edge of the river. "Come in with me," she whispered, and pulled me toward the water. "It is deep there, as you know," and I became all at once afraid of her and tried to turn back. She smiled and caught me by the wrist and said, "Oh, you must never be afraid with me." And somehow, at the touch of her hand, I became more helpless than a child. I felt like a person in a dream who tries to run and cannot move hand or foot. Into the deep water she stepped and drew me with her, and I neither saw nor heard nor felt anything more until I found myself walking beside her through what seemed to be a great palace full of light. I was neither wet nor cold. Everything around me was dry and warm and beautiful. I could not understand where I was, nor how I had come there. The woman led me by the hand. We passed through room after room, through ever so many rooms, all empty but very fine, until we entered into a guest room of 1,000 mats. Before a great alcove, at the farther end, lights were burning, and cushions laid as for a feast. But I saw no guests. She led me to the place of honor by the alcove, and seated herself in front of me, and said, "This is my home. Do you think that you could be happy with me here?" As she asked the question, she smiled, and I thought that her smile was more beautiful than anything else in the world. And out of my heart, I answered, "Yes." In the same moment, I remembered the story of Urashima, and I imagined that she might be the daughter of a god, but I feared to ask her any questions. Presently, maidservants came in, bearing rice wine and many dishes, which they set before us. Then she who sat before me said, "Tonight shall be our bridal night, because you like me, and this is our wedding feast." We pledged ourselves to each other for the time of 7 existences, and after the banquet, we were conducted to a bridal chamber, which had been prepared for us. It was yet early in the morning when she awoke me and said, "My dear one, you are now indeed my husband, but for reasons which I cannot tell you, and which you must not ask, it is necessary that our marriage remain secret. To keep you here until daybreak would cost both of us our lives. Therefore do not, I beg of you, feel displeased because I must now send you back to the house of your lord. You can come to me tonight again, and every night hereafter, at the same hour that we first met. Wait always for me by the bridge, and you will not have to wait long. But remember, above all things, that our marriage must be a secret, and that, if you talk about it, we shall probably be separated forever." I promised to obey her in all things, remembering the fate of Urashima, and she conducted me through many rooms, all empty and beautiful, to the entrance. There she again took me by the wrist, and everything suddenly became dark, and I knew nothing more until I found myself standing alone on the riverbank, close to the Nakanohashi. When I got back to the yashiki, the temple bells had not yet begun to ring. In the evening, I went again to the bridge at the hour she had named, and I found her waiting for me. She took me with her as before into the deep water, and into the wonderful place where we had passed our bridal night. And every night, since then, I have met and parted from her in the same way. Tonight, she will certainly be waiting for me, and I would rather die than disappoint her. Therefore, I must go. But let me again entreat you, my friend, never to speak to anyone about what I have told you." The elder Ashigaru was surprised and alarmed by this story. He felt that Chūgorō had told him the truth, and the truth suggested unpleasant possibilities. Probably the whole experience was an illusion, and an illusion produced by some evil power for a malevolent end. Nevertheless, if really bewitched, the lad was rather to be pitied than blamed, and any forcible interference would be likely to result in mischief. So the Ashigaru answered kindly, "I shall never speak of what you have told me, never at least while you remain alive and well. Go and meet the woman, but beware of her. I fear that you are being deceived by some wicked spirit." Chūgorō only smiled at the old man's warning and hastened away. Several hours later, he re-entered the yashiki with a strangely dejected look. "Did you meet her?" whispered his comrade. "No," replied Chūgorō. "She was not there. For the first time, she was not there. I think that she will never meet me again. I did wrong to tell you. I was very foolish to break my promise." The other vainly tried to console him. Chūgorō lay down and spoke no word more. He was trembling from head to foot, as if he had caught a chill. When the temple bells announced the hour of dawn, Chūgorō tried to get up and fell back senseless. He was evidently sick, deathly sick. A Chinese physician was summoned. "Why, the man has no blood," exclaimed the doctor after a careful examination. "There is nothing but water in his veins. It will be very difficult to save him." What maleficence is this? Everything was done that could be done to save Chūgorō's life, but in vain. He died as the sun went down. Then his comrade related the whole story. "Ah, I might have suspected as much," exclaimed the doctor. "No power could have saved him. He was not the first whom she destroyed." "Who is she? Or what is she?" the Ashigaru asked. "A fox woman?" "No. She has been haunting this river from ancient time. She loves the blood of the young." "A serpent woman? A dragon woman?" No. If you were to see her under that bridge by daylight, she would appear to you a very loathsome creature. But what kind of a creature? Simply a frog. A great and ugly frog. Footnote 1. The Ashigaru were the lowest class. Fragment. And it was at the hour of sunset that they came to the foot of the mountain. There was in that place no sign of life, neither token of water, nor trace of plant, nor shadow of flying bird. Nothing but desolation rising to desolation. And the summit was lost in heaven. Then the Bodhisattva said to his young companion, "What you have asked to see will be shown to you, but the place of the vision is far, and the way is rude. Follow after me, and do not fear. Strength will be given you." Twilight gloomed about them as they climbed. There was no beaten path, nor any mark of former human visitation, and the way was over an endless heaping of tumbled fragments that rolled or turned beneath the foot. Sometimes a mass dislodged would clatter down with hollow echoings. Sometimes the substance trodden would burst like an empty shell. Stars pointed and thrilled, and the darkness deepened. "Do not fear, my son," said the Bodhisattva, guiding. "Danger there is none, though the way be grim." Under the stars they climbed, fast, fast, mounting by help of power superhuman. High zones of mist they passed, and they saw below them, ever widening as they climbed, a soundless flood of cloud, like the tide of a milky sea. Hour after hour they climbed, and forms invisible yielded to their tread with dull, soft crashings, and faint cold fires lighted and died at every breaking. And once the pilgrim youth laid hand on a something smooth that was not stone, and lifted it, and dimly saw the cheekless gibe of death. "Linger not thus, my son," urged the voice of the teacher. "The summit that we must gain is very far away." On through the dark they climbed, and felt continually beneath them the soft, strange breakings, and saw the icy fires worm and die, till the rim of the night turned gray, and the stars began to fail, and the east began to bloom. Yet still they climbed, fast, fast, mounting by help of power superhuman. About them now was frigidness of death, and silence tremendous. A gold flame kindled in the east. Then first to the pilgrim's gaze the steeps revealed their nakedness, and a trembling seized him, and a ghastly fear, for there was not any ground, neither beneath him, nor about him, nor above him, but a heaping only, monstrous and measureless, of skulls and fragments of skulls and dust of bone, with a shimmer of shed teeth strewn through the drift of it, like the shimmer of scrags of shell in the rack of a tide. "Do not fear, my son," cried the voice of the Bodhisattva. "Only the strong of heart can win to the place of the vision." Behind them, the world had vanished. Nothing remained but the clouds beneath, and the sky above, and the heaping of skulls between, up slanting out of sight. Then the sun climbed with the climbers, and there was no warmth in the light of him, but coldness sharp as a sword, and the horror of stupendous height, and the nightmare of stupendous depth, and the terror of silence, ever grew and grew, and weighed upon the pilgrim, and held his feet, so that suddenly all power departed from him, and he moaned like a sleeper in dreams. "Hasten, hasten, my son," cried the Bodhisattva. "The day is brief, and the summit is very far away." But the pilgrim shrieked, I fear unspeakably, and the power has departed from me." "The power will return, my son," made answer the Bodhisattva. "Look now below you, and above you, and about you, and tell me what you see." "I cannot," cried the pilgrim, trembling and clinging. "I dare not look beneath. Before me and about me there is nothing but skulls of men." "And yet, my son," said the Bodhisattva, laughing softly, And yet you do not know of what this mountain is made." The other, shuddering, repeated, "I fear. Unutterably I fear. There is nothing but skulls of men." "A mountain of skulls it is," responded the Bodhisattva. "But know, my son, that all of them are your own. Each has at some time been the nest of your dreams and delusions and desires. Not even one of them is the skull of any other being. All without exception, have been yours in the billions of your former." The Story of O-Tei. A long time ago, in the town of Niigata, in the province of Echizen, there lived a man called Nagao Chosei. Nagao was the son of a physician and was educated for his father's profession. At an early age, he had been betrothed to a girl called O-Tei, the daughter of one of his father's friends, and both families had agreed that the wedding should take place as soon as Nagao had finished his studies. But the health of O-Tei proved to be weak, and in her 15th year she was attacked by a fatal consumption. When she became aware that she must die, she sent for Nagao to bid him farewell. As he knelt at her bedside, she said to him, "Nagao-sama, 1. My betrothed, we were promised to each other from the time of our childhood, and we were to have been married at the end of this year. But now I am going to die. The gods know what is best for us. If I were able to live for some years longer, I could only continue to be a cause of trouble and grief for others. With this frail body, I could not be a good wife, and therefore, even to wish to live for your sake would be a very selfish wish. I am quite resigned to die, and I want you to promise that you will not grieve. Besides, I want to tell you that I think we shall meet again." "Indeed, we shall meet again," Nagao answered earnestly. "And in that pure land, too, there will be no pain of separation." "Nay, nay," she responded softly. "I meant not the pure land. I believe that we are destined to meet again in this world, although I shall be buried tomorrow." Nagao looked at her wonderingly and saw her smile at his wonder. She continued in her gentle, dreamy voice, "Yes, I mean in this world, in your own present life, Nagao-sama, providing indeed that you wish it. Only for this thing to happen, I must again be born a girl and grow up to womanhood. So you would have to wait. 15, 16 years? That is a long time. But my promised husband, you are now only 19 years old." Eager to soothe her dying moments, he answered tenderly, "To wait for you, my betrothed, were no less a joy than a duty. We are pledged to each other for the time of 7 existences." "But you doubt?" she questioned, watching his face. "My dear one," he answered, "I doubt whether I should be able to know you in another body, under another name, unless you can tell me of a sign or token." "That I cannot do," she said. "Only the gods and the Buddhas know how and where we shall meet. But I am sure, very, very sure, that if you be not unwilling to receive me, I shall be able to come back to you. Remember these words of mine." She ceased to speak, and her eyes closed. She was dead. Nagao had been sincerely attached to O-Tei, and his grief was deep. He had a mortuary tablet made, inscribed with her Zokumyo, and he placed the tablet in his gore Utsudan-men, and every day set offerings before it. He thought a great deal about the strange things that O-Tei had said to him just before her death, and in the hope of pleasing her spirit, he wrote a solemn promise to wed her if she could ever return to him in another body. This written promise he sealed with his seal, and placed in the Butsudan beside the mortuary tablet of O-Tei. Nevertheless, as Nagao was an only son, it was necessary that he should marry. He soon found himself obliged to yield to the wishes of his family and to accept a wife of his father's choosing. After his marriage, he continued to set offerings before the tablet of O-Tei, and he never failed to remember her with affection. But by degrees, her image became dim in his memory, like a dream that is hard to recall. And the years went by. During those years, many misfortunes came upon him. He lost his parents by death, then his wife and his only child, so that he found himself alone in the world. He abandoned his desolate home and set out upon a long journey in the hope of forgetting his sorrows. One day, in the course of his travels, he arrived at Ikao, a mountain village still famed for its thermal springs and for the beautiful scenery of its neighborhood. In the village inn at which he stopped, a young girl came to wait upon him, and at the first sight of her face, he felt his heart leap as it had never leaped before. So strangely did she resemble O-Tei that he pinched himself to make sure that he was not dreaming. As she went and came, bringing fire and food, or arranging the chamber of the guest, her every attitude and motion revived in him some gracious memory of the girl to whom he had been pledged in his youth. He spoke to her, and she responded in a soft, clear voice, of which the sweetness saddened him with the sadness of other days. Then, in great wonder, he questioned her, saying, "Elder sister, 3. So much do you look like a person whom I knew long ago, that I was startled when you first entered this room. Pardon me, therefore, for asking what is your native place and what is your name?" Immediately, and in the unforgotten voice of the dead, she thus made answer, "My name is O-Tei, and you are Nagao Chosei of Ichigo, my promised husband. 17 years ago, I died in Niigata. Then you made in writing a promise to marry me if ever I could come back to this world in the body of a woman. And you sealed that written promise with your seal and put it in the Butsudan Ungur, beside the tablet inscribed with my name, and therefore I came back." As she uttered these last words, she fell unconscious. Nagao married her, and the marriage was a happy one. But at no time afterwards could she remember what she had told him in answer to his question at Ikao. Neither could she remember anything of her previous existence. The recollection of the former birth, mysteriously kindled in the moment of that meeting, had again become obscured, and so the Sympathy of Benten. The original story is in the Otogi Hyaku Monogatari, but in Kyoto, there is a famous temple called Amadera. Sadazumi Shino, the 5th son of the Emperor Seiwa, passed the greater part of his life there as a priest, and the graves of many celebrated persons are to be seen in the temple grounds. But the present edifice is not the ancient Amadera. The original temple, after the lapse of 10 centuries, fell into such decay that it had to be entirely rebuilt in the 14th year of Jinroku, 1701 AD. A great festival was held to celebrate the rebuilding of the Amadera, and among the thousands of persons who attended that festival, there was a young scholar and poet named Hanagaki Baishu. He wandered about the newly laid out grounds and gardens, delighted by all that he saw, until he reached the place of a spring at which he had often drunk in former times. He was then surprised to find that the soil about the spring had been dug away, so as to form a square pond, and that at one corner of this pond there had been set up a wooden tablet bearing the words Tanjo Sui, Earth Water. He also saw that a small but very handsome temple of the goddess Benten had been erected beside the pond. While he was looking at this new temple, a sudden gust of wind blew to his feet Tanzaku, on which the following poem had been written: Shirushi Areto, Iwaizo Samaru, Tamahoki, Toru Bakari, no, Shigiri Naretomon. The word Kanjo, birth, should here be understood in its mystical Buddhist meaning of new life or rebirth, rather than in the Western signification of birth. Tanzaku is the name given to the long strips or ribbons of paper, usually colored, upon which poems are written perpendicularly. Poems written upon Tanzaku are suspended to trees and flower, to wind bells, to any beautiful object in which the poet has found an inspiration. This poem, A poem on first love, Hatsukoi, composed by the famous Shunrei Kyo, was not unfamiliar to him, but it had been written upon the tanzaku by a female hand, and so exquisitely that he could scarcely believe his eyes. Something in the form of the characters, an indefinite grace, suggested that period of youth between childhood and womanhood, and the pure, rich color of the ink seemed to bespeak the purity and goodness of the writer's heart. It is difficult for the inexperienced European eye to distinguish in Chinese or Japanese writing those characteristics implied by our term hand, in the sense of individual style, but the Japanese scholar never forgets the peculiarities of a handwriting once seen, and he can even guess at the approximate age of the writer. Chinese and Japanese authors claim that the color, quality of the ink used tells something of the character of the writer. As every person grounds or prepares his or her own ink, the deeper and clearer black would at least indicate something of personal carefulness and of the sense of beauty. Baishu carefully folded up the core tanzaku and took it home with him. When he looked at it again, the writing appeared to him even more wonderful than at first. His knowledge in calligraphy assured him only that the poem had been written by some girl who was very young, very intelligent, and probably very gentle-hearted. But this assurance sufficed to shape within his mind the image of a very charming person, and he soon found himself in love with the unknown. Then his first resolve was to seek out the writer of the verses and, if possible, make her his wife. Yet how was he to find her? Who was she? Where did she live? Certainly he could hope to find her only through the favor of the gods, but presently it occurred to him that the gods might be very willing to lend their aid. The Karnenzaku had come to him while he was standing in front of the temple of Benten-sama, and it was to this divinity in particular that lovers were wont to pray for happy union. This reflection impelled him to beseech the goddess for assistance. He went at once to the temple of Benten of the Birth, Water, Tanjo Sui no Benten, in the grounds of the Amadera, and there, with all the fervor of his heart, he made his petition. O goddess, pity me. Help me to find where the young person lives who wrote the Kurtenzaku. Vouchsafe me but one chance to meet her, even if only for a moment. And after having made this prayer, he began to perform a 7 days religious service, Nanuka-Mari, in honor of the goddess, vowing at the same time to pass the 7th night in ceaseless worship before her shrine. There are many kinds of religious exercises called Mari. The performer of a Nanuka-Mari Dunscore pledges himself to pray at a certain temple every day for 7 days in succession. Now on the 7th night, the night of his vigil, during the hour when the silence is most deep, he heard at the main gateway of the temple grounds a voice calling for admittance. Another voice from within answered. The gate was opened, and Baishu saw an old man of majestic appearance approaching with slow steps. This venerable person was clad in robes of ceremony, and he wore upon his snow-white head a black cap, iboshi, of the form indicating high rank. Reaching the little temple of Benten, he knelt down in front of it, as if respectfully awaiting some order. Then the outer door of the temple was opened. The hanging curtain of bamboo behind it, concealing the inner sanctuary, was rolled halfway up, and Achigo came forward, a beautiful boy with long hair tied back in the ancient manner. He stood at the threshold and said to the old man in a clear, loud voice, the term Chigo usually means the page of a noble household, especially an imperial page. The Arshigo who appears in this story is of course a supernatural being, the court messenger of the goddess and her mouthpiece. There is a person here who has been praying for a love union not suitable to his present condition and otherwise difficult to bring about. But as the young man is worthy of our pity, you have been called to see whether something can be done for him. If there should prove to be any relation between the parties from the period of a former birth, you will introduce them to each other. On receiving this command, the old man bowed respectfully to the Shigo Then, rising, he drew from the pocket of his long left sleeve a crimson cord. One end of this cord he passed round Baishu's body, as if to bind him with it. The other end he put into the flame of one of the temple lamps, and while the cord was there burning, he waved his hand 3 times, as if to summon somebody out of the dark. Immediately, in the direction of the Amadera, a sound of coming steps was heard, and in another moment a girl appeared. A charming girl, 15 or 16 years old. She approached gracefully, but very shyly, hiding the lower part of her face with a fan, and she knelt down beside Baishu. The score Chigo then said to Baishu, "Recently you have been suffering much heart pain, and this desperate love of yours has even impaired your health. We could not allow you to remain in so unhappy a condition, and we therefore summoned the old man under the moon to make you acquainted with the writer of that Tanzaku. She is now beside you, Gekuo." This is a poetical appellation for the god of marriage, more usually known as Kor Musubi no Kami. Throughout this story, there is an interesting mingling of Shinto and Buddhist ideas. With these words, the Chigo retired behind the bamboo curtain. Then the old man went away as he had come, and the young girl followed him. Simultaneously, Baishu heard the great bell of the Amadera sounding the hour of dawn. He prostrated himself in thanksgiving before the shrine of Benten of the Birthwater and proceeded homeward, feeling as if awakened from some delightful dream, happy at having seen the charming person whom he had so fervently prayed to meet. Unhappy also because of the fear that he might never meet her again. But scarcely had he passed from the gateway into the street when he saw a young girl walking alone in the same direction that he was going, and even in the dusk of the dawn, he recognized her at once as the person to whom he had been introduced before the temple of Benten. As he quickened his pace to overtake her, she turned and saluted him with a graceful bow. Then for the first time he ventured to speak to her, and she answered him in a voice of which the sweetness filled his heart with joy. Through the yet silent streets they walked on, chatting happily, till they found themselves before the house where Baishu lived. There he paused, spoke to the girl of his hopes and fears. Smiling, she asked, "Do you not know that I was sent for to become your wife?" And she entered with him. Becoming his wife, she delighted him beyond expectation by the charm of her mind and heart. Moreover, he found her to be much more accomplished than he had supposed. Besides being able to write so wonderfully, she could paint beautiful pictures. She knew the art of arranging flowers, the art of embroidery, the art of music. She could weave and sew, and she knew everything in regard to the management of a house. It was in the early autumn that the young people had met, and they lived together in perfect accord until the winter season began. Nothing during those months occurred to disturb their peace. Baishu's love for his gentle wife only strengthened with the passing of time. Yet, strangely enough, he remained ignorant of her history, knew nothing about her family. Of such matters she had never spoken, and as the gods had given her to him, he imagined that it would not be proper to question her. But neither the old man under the moon nor anyone else came, as he had feared, to take her away. Nobody even made any inquiries about her, and the neighbors, for some undiscoverable reason, acted as if totally unaware of her presence. Baishu wondered at all this, but stranger experiences were awaiting him. One winter morning he happened to be passing through a somewhat remote quarter of the city when he heard himself loudly called by name and saw a manservant making signs to him from the gateway of a private residence. As Baishu did not know the man's face and did not have a single acquaintance in that part of Kyoto, he was more than startled by so abrupt a summons. But the servant, coming forward, saluted him with the utmost respect and said, "My master greatly desires the honor of speaking with you. Deign to enter for a moment." After an instant of hesitation, Baishu allowed himself to be conducted to the house. A dignified and richly dressed person, who seemed to be the master, welcomed him at the entrance. and led him to the guest room. When the courtesies due upon a first meeting had been fully exchanged, the host apologized for the informal manner of his invitation and said, "It must have seemed to you very rude of us to call you in such a way. But perhaps you will pardon our impoliteness when I tell you that we acted thus upon what I firmly believe to have been an inspiration from the goddess Benten. Now, permit me to explain. I have a daughter about 16 years old who can write rather well and do other things in the common way. She has the ordinary nature of woman. As we were anxious to make her happy by finding a good husband for her, we prayed the goddess Benten to help us, and we sent to every temple of Benten in the city a tanzaku written by the girl. Some nights later, the goddess appeared to me in a dream and said, 'We have heard your prayer and have already introduced your daughter to the person who is to become her husband. During the coming winter, he will visit you.' As I did not understand this assurance that a presentation had been made, I felt some doubt. I thought that the dream might have been only a common dream, signifying nothing. But last night again, I saw Benten-sama in a dream, and she said to me, 'Tomorrow the young man of whom I once spoke to you will come to this street. Then you can call him into your house and ask him to become the husband of your daughter. He is a good young man, and later in life he will obtain a much higher rank than he now holds.' Then Benten-sama told me your name, your age, your birthplace, and described your features and dress so exactly that my servant found no difficulty in recognizing you by the indications which I was able to give him. As it is the old Japanese rule that parents should speak depreciatingly of their children's accomplishments, the phrase 'rather well' in this connection would mean, for the visitor, wonderfully well. For the same reason, the expressions 'common way' and 'ordinary nature', as subsequently used, would imply almost the reverse of the literal meaning. This explanation bewildered Baishu instead of reassuring him, and his only reply was a formal return of thanks for the honor which the master of the house had spoken of doing him. But when the host invited him to another room for the purpose of presenting him to the young lady, his embarrassment became extreme, yet he could not reasonably decline the introduction. He could not bring himself, under such extraordinary circumstances, to announce that he already had a wife given to him by the goddess Benten herself, a wife from whom he could not even think of separating. So, in silence and trepidation, he followed his host to the apartment indicated. Then what was his amazement to discover, when presented to the daughter of the house, that she was the very same person whom he had already taken to wife. The same, yet not the same. She to whom he had been introduced by the old man under the moon was only the soul of the beloved. She to whom he was now to be wedded in her father's house was the body. Benten had wrought this miracle for the sake of her worshippers. The original story breaks off suddenly at this point, leaving several matters unexplained. The ending is rather unsatisfactory. One would like to know something about the mental experiences of the real maiden during the married life of her phantom. One would also like to know what became of the phantom, whether it continued to lead an independent existence, whether it waited patiently for the return of its husband, whether it paid a visit to the real bride. And the book says nothing about these things. But a Japanese friend explains the miracle thus. The spirit bride was really formed out of the Kortanzaku, so it is possible that the real girl did not know anything about the meeting at the temple of Benten. When she wrote those beautiful characters upon the kanzaku, something of her spirit passed into them. Therefore, it was possible to avoid The Legend of Yurei-Daki. Near the village of Kurosaka, in the province of Hoki, there is a waterfall called Yurei-Daki, or the Cascade of Ghosts. Why it is so called, I do not know. Near the foot of the fall, there is a small Shinto shrine of the god of the locality, whom the people name Taki Daimyojin, and in front of the shrine is a little wooden money box, Saizen Bako. to receive the offerings of believers. And there is a story about that money box. One icy winter's evening, 35 years ago, the women and girls employed at a certain asatoriba, or hemp factory in Kurosaka, gathered around the big brazier in the spinning room after their day's work had been done. Then they amused themselves by telling ghost stories. By the time that a dozen stories had been told, most of the gathering felt uncomfortable, and a girl cried out, just to heighten the pleasure of fear, "Only think of going this night, all by oneself, to the Yurei-Daki." The suggestion provoked a general scream, followed by nervous bursts of laughter. "I'll give all the hemp I spun today," mockingly said one of the party, "to the person who goes." "So will I," exclaimed another. "And I," said a third. "All of us," affirmed a fourth. Then from among the spinners stood up one Yasumoto Okatsu, the wife of a carpenter. She had her only son, a boy of 2 years old, snugly wrapped up and asleep upon her back. "Listen," said Okatsu, "if you will all really agree to make over to me all the hemp spun today, I will go to the Yurei-Daki." Her proposal was received with cries of astonishment and of defiance, but after having been several times repeated, it was seriously taken. Each of the spinners in turn agreed to give up her share of the day's work to Okatsu, providing that Okatsu should go to the Yurei-Daki. "But how are we to know if she really goes there?" a sharp voice asked. "Why, let her bring back the money box of the god," answered an old woman, whom the spinners called Oba-san, the grandmother. "That will be proof enough." "I'll bring it," cried Okatsu, and out she darted into the street, with her sleeping boy upon her back. The night was frosty, but clear. Down the empty snow Okatsu hurried, and she saw that all the house fronts were tightly closed because of the piercing cold. Out of the village and along the high road she ran, pisha, with the great silence of frozen rice fields on either hand, and only the stars to light her. Half an hour she followed the open road, then she turned down a narrower way, winding under cliffs. Darker and rougher the path became as she proceeded, but she knew it well, and she soon heard the dull roar of the water. A few minutes more, and the way widened into a glen, and the dull roar suddenly became a loud clamor, and before her she saw, looming against a mass of blackness, the long glimmering of the fall. Dimly she perceived the shrine, the money box. She rushed forward, put out her hand. "Oi, Okatsu-san!" suddenly called a warning voice above the crash of the water. Okatsu stood motionless, stupefied by terror. "Oi, Okatsu-san!" again pealed the voice, this time with more of menace in its tone. But Okatsu was really a bold woman. At once recovering from her stupefaction, she snatched up the money box and ran. She neither heard nor saw anything more to alarm her until she reached the high road, where she stopped a moment to take breath. Then she ran on steadily, picha, till she got to Kurosaka and thumped at the door of the asatoriba. How the women and the girls cried out as she entered, panting, with the money box of the god in her hand. Breathlessly they heard her story. Sympathetically they screeched when she told them of the voice that had called her name twice out of the haunted water. What a woman! Brave Okatsu! Well had she earned the hemp. "But your boy must be cold, Okatsu," cried the Oba-san. "Let us have him here by the fire." "He ought to be hungry," exclaimed the mother. "I must give him his milk presently." "Poor Okatsu," said the Oba-san, helping to remove the wraps in which the boy had been carried. "Why, you are all wet behind." Then, with a husky scream, the helper vociferated, "Arrah, it is blood!" And out of the wrappings unfastened there fell to the floor a blood-soaked bundle of baby clothes that left exposed 2 very small brown feet and 2 very small brown hands. Nothing more. The child's head had been torn off. Footnote 1. The exclamation, "Oi," is used to call the attention of a person. It is the Japanese equivalent for such English exclamations as hello, ho there. Have you ever attempted to mount some old tower stairway, sparing up through darkness, and in the heart of that darkness found yourself at the cobwebbed edge of nothing? Or have you followed some coast path cut along the face of a cliff, only to discover yourself at a turn on the jagged verge of a break? The emotional worth of such experience, from a literary point of view, is proved by the force of the sensations aroused, and by the vividness with which they are remembered. Now there have been curiously preserved in old Japanese storybooks certain fragments of fiction that produce an almost similar emotional experience. Perhaps the writer was lazy. Perhaps he had a quarrel with the publisher. Perhaps he was suddenly called away from his little table and never came back. Perhaps death stopped the writing brush in the very middle of a sentence. But no mortal man can ever tell us exactly why these things were left unfinished. On the 4th day of the 1st month of the 3rd Tenwa, that is to say, about 220 years ago, the Lord Nakagawa Soto, while on his way to make a New Year's visit, halted with his train at a tea house in Hakusan, in the Hongo district of Yedo. While the party were resting there, one of the Lord's attendants, a Wakato named Sekanai, feeling very thirsty, filled for himself a large water cup with tea. He was raising the cup to his lips when he suddenly perceived, in the transparent yellow infusion, the image or reflection of a face that was not his own. Startled, he looked around, but could see no one near him. The face in the tea appeared, from the coiffure, to be the face of a young samurai. It was strangely distinct and very handsome, delicate as the face of a girl. And it seemed the reflection of a living face, for the eyes and the lips were moving. Bewildered by this mysterious apparition, Sekanai threw away the tea and carefully examined the cup. It proved to be a very cheap water cup, with no artistic devices of any sort. He found and filled another cup, and again the face appeared in the tea. He then ordered fresh tea and refilled the cup. And once more the strange face appeared, this time with a mocking smile. But Sekanai did not allow himself to be frightened. "Whoever you are," he muttered, "you shall delude me no further." Then he swallowed the tea, face and all, and went his way, wondering whether he had swallowed a ghost. Late in the evening of the same day, while on watch in the palace of the Lord Nakagawa, Sekanai was surprised by the soundless coming of a stranger into the apartment. This stranger, a richly dressed young samurai, seated himself directly in front of Sekanai, and saluting the Wakato with a slight bow, observed, "I am Shikibu Hainai. Met you today for the first time. You do not seem to recognize me." He spoke in a very low but penetrating voice, and Sekanai was astonished to find before him the same sinister, handsome face of which he had seen and swallowed the apparition in a cup of tea. It was smiling now, as the phantom had smiled, but the steady gaze of the eyes, above the smiling lips, was at once a challenge and an insult. "No, I do not recognize you," returned Sekanai, angry but cool. "And perhaps you will now be good enough to inform me how you obtained admission to this house." "Ah, you do not recognize me," exclaimed the visitor, in a tone of irony, drawing a little nearer as he spoke. "No, you do not recognize me. Yet you took upon yourself this morning to do me a deadly injury." Sekanai instantly seized the tanto at his girdle and made a fierce thrust at the throat of the man. But the blade seemed to touch no substance. Simultaneously and soundlessly, the intruder leaped sideward to the chamber wall and through it. The wall showed no trace of his exit. He had traversed it only as the light of a candle passes through lantern paper. When Sekanai made report of the incident, his recital astonished and puzzled the retainers. No stranger had been seen either to enter or to leave the palace at the hour of the occurrence. and no one in the service of the Lord Nakagawa had ever heard of the name Shikibu Hainai. On the following night, Sekanai was off duty and remained at home with his parents. At a rather late hour, he was informed that some strangers had called at the house and desired to speak with him for a moment. Taking his sword, he went to the entrance, and there found 3 armed men, apparently retainers, waiting in front of the doorstep. The 3 bowed respectfully to Sekanai, and one of them said, "Our names are Matsuoka Bungo, Tsuchibashi Bungo, and Okamura Haroku. We are retainers of the noble Shikibu Hainai. When our master last night deigned to pay you a visit, you struck him with a sword. He was much hurt and has been obliged to go to the hot springs, where his wound is now being treated. But on the 16th day of the coming month he will return, and he will then fitly repay you for the injury done him." Without waiting to hear more, Sekanai leaped out, sword in hand, and slashed right and left at the strangers. But the 3 men sprang to the wall of the adjoining building and flitted up the wall like shadows. And here the old narrative breaks off. The rest of the story existed only in some brain that has been dust for a century. I am able to imagine several possible endings, but none of them would satisfy an Occidental imagination. I prefer to let the reader attempt to decide for himself the probable consequence of There was a young samurai of Kyoto who had been reduced to poverty by the ruin of his lord, and found himself obliged to leave his home and to take service with the governor of a distant province. Before quitting the capital, this samurai divorced his wife, a good and beautiful woman, under the belief that he could better obtain promotion by another alliance. He then married the daughter of a family of some distinction and took her with him to the district whither he had been called. But it was in the time of the thoughtlessness of youth and the sharp experience of want that the samurai could not understand the worth of the affection so lightly cast away. His second marriage did not prove a happy one. The character of his new wife was hard and selfish, and he soon found every cause to think with regret of Kyoto days. Then he discovered that he still loved his first wife, loved her more than he could ever love the second, and he began to feel how unjust and how thankless he had been. Gradually, his repentance deepened into a remorse that left him no peace of mind. Memories of the woman he had wronged, her gentle speech, her smiles, her dainty, pretty ways, her faultless patience, continually haunted him. Sometimes in dreams he saw her at her loom, weaving as when she toiled night and day to help him during the years of their distress. More often he saw her kneeling alone in the desolate little room where he had left her, veiling her tears with her poor worn sleeve. Even in the hours of official duty, his thoughts would wander back to her. Then he would ask himself how she was living, what she was doing. Something in his heart assured him that she could not accept another husband, and that she never would refuse to pardon him. And he secretly resolved to seek her out as soon as he could return to Kyoto, then to beg her forgiveness, to take her back, to do everything that a man could do to make atonement. But the years went by. At last, the governor's official term expired, and the samurai was free. "Now I will go back to my dear one," he vowed to himself. Ah, what a cruelty, what a folly to have divorced her. He sent his second wife to her own people. She had given him no children. And hurrying to Kyoto, he went at once to seek his former companion, not allowing himself even the time to change his traveling garb. When he reached the street where she used to live, it was late in the night of the 10th day of the 9th month, and the city was silent as a cemetery. But a bright moon made everything visible, and he found the house without difficulty. It had a deserted look. Tall weeds were growing on the roof. He knocked at the sliding doors, and no one answered. Then, finding that the doors had not been fastened from within, he pushed them open and entered. The front room was matless and empty. A chilly wind was blowing through crevices in the planking. and the moon shone through a ragged break in the wall of the alcove. Other rooms presented a like forlorn condition. The house, to all seeming, was unoccupied. Nevertheless, the samurai determined to visit one other apartment at the further end of the dwelling, a very small room that had been his wife's favorite resting place. Approaching the sliding screen that closed it, he was startled to perceive a glow within. He pushed the screen aside and uttered a cry of joy, for he saw her there, sewing by the light of a paper lamp. Her eyes at the same instant met his own, and with a happy smile she greeted him, asking only, "When did you come back to Kyoto? How did you find your way here to me through all those black rooms?" The years had not changed her. Still, she seemed as fair and young as in his fondest memory of her. But sweeter than any memory there came to him the music of her voice, with its trembling of pleased wonder. Then joyfully he took his place beside her and told her all. How deeply he repented his selfishness. How wretched he had been without her. How constantly he had regretted her. How long he had hoped and planned to make amends, caressing her the while and asking her forgiveness over and over again. She answered him with loving gentleness, according to his heart's desire, entreating him to cease all self-reproach. It was wrong, she said, that he should have allowed himself to suffer on her account. She had always felt that she was not worthy to be his wife. She knew that he had separated from her, notwithstanding, only because of poverty, and while he lived with her, he had always been kind, and she had never ceased to pray for his happiness. But even if there had been a reason for speaking of amends, this honorable visit would be ample amends. What greater happiness than thus to see him again, though it were only for a moment. Only for a moment, he answered, with a glad laugh. Say rather for the time of 7 existences. My loved one, unless you forbid, I am coming back to live with you always. 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 Nothing shall ever separate us again. Now I have means and friends. We need not fear poverty. Tomorrow my goods will be brought here, and my servants will come to wait upon you, and we shall make this house beautiful. Tonight, he added, apologetically, I came thus late, without even changing my dress, only because of the longing I had to see you and to tell you this. She seemed greatly pleased by these words, and in her turn, she told him about all that had happened in Kyoto since the time of his departure, excepting her own sorrows, of which she sweetly refused to speak. They chatted far into the night. Then she conducted him to a warmer room, facing south, a room that had been their bridal chamber in former time. Have you no one in the house to help you? He asked, as she began to prepare the couch for him. No, she answered, laughing cheerfully. I could not afford a servant, so I have been living all alone. You will have plenty of servants tomorrow, he said. Good servants, and everything else that you need. They lay down to rest, not to sleep. They had too much to tell each other, and they talked of the past and the present and the future until the dawn was gray. Then, involuntarily, the samurai closed his eyes and slept. When he awoke, the daylight was streaming through the chinks of the sliding shutters, and he found himself, to his utter amazement, lying upon the naked boards of a moldering floor. Had he only dreamed a dream? No, she was there. She slept. He bent above her and looked and shrieked, for the sleeper had no face. Before him, wrapped in its grave sheet only, lay the corpse of a woman, a corpse so wasted that little remained save the bones and the long black tangled hair. Slowly, as he stood shuddering and sickening in the sun, the icy horror yielded to a despair so intolerable, a pain so atrocious, that he clutched at the mocking shadow of a doubt. Feigning ignorance of the neighborhood, he ventured to ask his way to the house in which his wife had lived. There is no one in that house, said the person questioned. It used to belong to the wife of a samurai who left the city several years ago. He divorced her in order to marry another woman before he went away, and she fretted a great deal and so became sick. She had no relatives in Kyoto and nobody to care for her, and she died in the autumn of the same year, on the 10th day. In the Toyama district of the province of Bishu, there formerly lived a young farmer and his wife. Their farm was situated in a lonely place, among the hills. One night, the wife dreamed that her father-in-law, who had died some years before, came to her and said, "Tomorrow I shall be in great danger. Try to save me if you can." In the morning, she told this to her husband, and they talked about the dream. Both imagined that the dead man wanted something, but neither could imagine what the words of the vision signified. After breakfast, the husband went to the fields, but the wife remained at her loom. Presently, she was startled by a great shouting outside. She went to the door and saw the Jido of the district, with a hunting party, approaching the farm. While she stood watching them, a pheasant ran by her into the house, and she suddenly remembered her dream. "Perhaps it is my father-in-law," she thought to herself. "I must try to save it." Then, hurrying in after the bird, a fine male pheasant, she caught it without any difficulty, put it into the empty rice pot, and covered the pot with the lid. A moment later, some of the Jido's followers entered and asked her whether she had seen a pheasant. She answered boldly that she had not, but one of the hunters declared that he had seen the bird run into the house. So the party searched for it, peeping into every nook and corner, but nobody thought of looking into the rice pot. After looking everywhere else to no purpose, the men decided that the bird must have escaped through some hole, and they went away. When the farmer came home, his wife told him about the pheasant, which she had left in the rice pot, so that he might see it. "When I caught it," she said, "it did not struggle in the least, and it remained very quiet in the pot. I really think that it is father-in-law." The farmer went to the pot, lifted the lid, and took out the bird. It remained still in his hands, as if tame, and looked at him as if accustomed to his presence. One of its eyes was blind. "Father was blind of one eye," the farmer said, "the right eye, and the right eye of this bird is blind. Really, I think it is father. See, it looks at us just as father used to do." Poor father must have thought to himself, "Now that I am a bird, better to give my body to my children for food than to let the hunters have it. And that explains your dream of last night," he added, turning to his wife with an evil smile as he wrung the pheasant's neck. At the sight of that brutal act, the woman screamed and cried out, "Oh, you wicked man! Oh, you devil! Only a man with the heart of a devil could do what you have done, and I would rather die than continue to be the wife of such a man." And she sprang to the door without waiting even to put on her sandals. He caught her sleeve as she leaped, but she broke away from him and ran out, sobbing as she ran. And she ceased not to run, barefooted, till she reached the town, when she hastened directly to the residence of the Jido. Then, with many tears, she told the Jido everything, her dream of the night before the hunting, and how she had hidden the pheasant in order to save it, and how her husband had mocked her and had killed it. The Jido spoke to her kindly and gave orders that she should be well cared for, but he commanded his officers to seize her husband. Next day, the farmer was brought up for judgment, and after he had been made to confess the truth concerning the killing of the pheasant, sentence was pronounced. The Jido said to him, "Only a person of evil heart could have acted as you have acted. In the presence of so perverse a being is a misfortune to the community in which he happens to reside. The people under our jurisdiction are people who respect the sentiment of filial piety, and among them you cannot be suffered to live." So the farmer was banished from the district and forbidden ever to return to it on pain of death. But to the woman, the Jido made a donation of land and at a later time, he caused her to be provided with a good husband. Footnote 1. The lord of the district, who acted both as governor and the story of Aoyagi. In the era of Bume, 1469 to 1486, there was a young samurai called Tomotada in the service of Hatakeyama Yoshimune, the lord of Noto. 1. Tomotada was a native of Ekizen. 2. But at an early age he had been taken as page into the palace of the daimyo of Noto, and had been educated under the supervision of that prince for the profession of arms. As he grew up, he proved himself both a good scholar and a good soldier, and continued to enjoy the favor of his prince. Being gifted with an amiable character, a winning address, and a very handsome person, he was admired and much liked by his samurai comrades. When Tomotada was about 20 years old, he was sent upon a private mission to Hosokawa Masamoto, the great daimyo of Kyoto, a kinsman of Hatakeyama Yoshimune. Having been ordered to journey through Echizen, the youth requested and obtained permission to pay a visit on the way to his widowed mother. It was the coldest period of the year when he started, and though mounted upon a powerful horse, he found himself obliged to proceed slowly. The road which he followed passed through a mountain district where the settlements were few and far between, and on the second day of his journey, after a weary ride of hours, he was dismayed to find that he could not reach his intended halting place until late in the night. He had reason to be anxious, for a heavy snowstorm came on with an intensely cold wind, and the horse showed signs of exhaustion. But in that trying moment, Tomotada unexpectedly perceived the thatched room of a cottage on the summit of a near hill, where willow trees were growing. With difficulty he urged his tired animal to the dwelling, and he loudly knocked upon the storm doors, which had been closed against the wind. An old woman opened them, and cried out compassionately at the sight of the handsome stranger. Ah, how pitiful! A young gentleman traveling alone in such weather. Deign, young master, to enter. Tomotada dismounted, and after leading his horse to a shed in the rear, entered the cottage, where he saw an old man and a girl warming themselves by a fire of bamboo splints. They respectfully invited him to approach the fire, and the old folks then proceeded to warm some rice wine and to prepare food for the traveler, whom they ventured to question in regard to his journey. Meanwhile, the young girl disappeared behind a screen. Tomotada had observed, with astonishment, that she was extremely beautiful, though her attire was of the most wretched kind, and her long, loose hair in disorder. He wondered that so handsome a girl should be living in such a miserable and lonesome place. The old man said to him, "Honored sir, the next village is far, and the snow is falling thickly. The wind is piercing, and the road is very bad. Therefore, to proceed further this night would probably be dangerous. Although this hovel is unworthy of your presence, and although we have not any comfort to offer, perhaps it were safer to remain tonight under this miserable roof. We would take good care of your horse." Tomotada accepted this humble proposal, secretly glad of the chance thus afforded him to see more of the young girl. Presently, a coarse but ample meal was set before him, and the girl came from behind the screen to serve the wine. She was now reclad in a rough but cleanly robe of homespun, and her long, loose hair had been neatly combed and smoothed. As she bent forward to fill his cup, Tomotada was amazed to perceive that she was incomparably more beautiful than any woman whom he had ever before seen, and there was a grace about her every motion that astonished him. But the elders began to apologize for her, saying, "Sir, our daughter, Aoyagi, has been brought up here in the mountains almost alone, and she knows nothing of gentle service. We pray that you will pardon her stupidity and her ignorance." Tomotada protested that he deemed himself lucky to be waited upon by so comely a maiden. He could not turn his eyes away from her, though he saw that his admiring gaze made her blush. and he left the wine and food untasted before him. The mother said, "Kind sir, we very much hope that you will try to eat and to drink a little, though our peasant fare is of the worst, as you must have been chilled by that piercing wind." Then, to please the old folks, Tomotada ate and drank as he could, but the charm of the blushing girl still grew upon him. He talked with her, and found that her speech was sweet as her face, brought up in the mountains as she might have been. But in that case, her parents must at some time been persons of high degree, for she spoke and moved like a damsel of rank. Suddenly, he addressed her with a poem, which was also a question, inspired by the delight in his heart. Tadzu netsuru, hanaka tote koso, aiwo kurase, akenu ni otoru.
Akane sasuran?
Being on my way to pay a visit, I found that which I took to be a flower. Therefore here I spend the day. Why, in the time before dawn, the dawn blush tint should glow. That indeed I know not. Without a moment's hesitation, she answered him in these verses. Izuru hai no. Onomeku iro wo. Waga sode ni. Tsutsumaba asumo. Kimiya tamaran. If with my sleeve I hid the faint fair color of the dawning sun, then perhaps in the morning my lord will remain. Then Tomotada knew that she accepted his admiration, and he was scarcely less surprised by the art with which she had uttered her feelings in verse, than delighted by the assurance which the verses conveyed. He was now certain that in all this world he could not hope to meet, much less to win, a girl more beautiful and witty than this rustic maid before him, and a voice in his heart seemed to cry out urgently, "Take the luck that the gods have put in your way." In short, he was bewitched. Bewitched to such a degree that, without further preliminary, he asked the old people to give him their daughter in marriage, telling them, at the same time, his name and lineage, and his rank in the train of the Lord of Noto. They bowed down before him, with many exclamations of grateful astonishment. But, after some moments of apparent hesitation, the father replied, "Honored master, you are a person of high position, and likely to rise to still higher things. Too great is the favor that you deign to offer us. Indeed, the depth of our gratitude, therefore, is not to be spoken or measured. But this girl of ours, being a stupid country girl of vulgar birth, with no training or teaching of any sort, it would be improper to let her become the wife of a noble samurai. Even to speak of such a matter is not right. But since you find the girl to your liking, and have condescended to pardon her peasant manners and to overlook her great rudeness, we do gladly present her to you, for an humble handmaid. Deign therefore to act hereafter in her regard according to your august pleasure." Ere morning the storm had passed, and day broke through a cloudless east. Even if the sleeve of Aoyagi hid from her lover's eyes the rose blush of that dawn, he could no longer tarry, but neither could he resign himself to part with the girl. And when everything had been prepared for his journey, he thus addressed her parents. "Though it may seem thankless to ask for more than I have already received, I must again beg you to give me your daughter for wife. It would be difficult for me to separate from her now, and as she is willing to accompany me, if you permit, I can take her with me as she is. If you will give her to me, I shall ever cherish you as parents. And in the meantime, please to accept this poor acknowledgement of your kindest hospitality." So saying, he placed before his humble host a purse of gold ryo. But the old man, after many prostrations, gently pushed back the gift and said, "Kind master, the gold would be of no use to us, and you will probably have need of it during your long cold journey. Here we buy nothing, and we could not spend so much money upon ourselves even if we wished. As for the girl, we have already bestowed her as a free gift. She belongs to you. Therefore, it is not necessary to ask our leave to take her away. Already she has told us that she hopes to accompany you, and to remain your servant for as long as you may be willing to endure her presence. We are only too happy to know that you deign to accept her, and we pray that you will not trouble yourself on our account. In this place, we could not provide her with proper clothing, much less with a dowry. Moreover, being old, we should in any event have to separate from her before long. Therefore, it is very fortunate that you should be willing to take her with you now. It was in vain that Tomotada tried to persuade the old people to accept a present. He found that they cared nothing for money, but he saw that they were really anxious to trust their daughter's fate to his hands, and he therefore decided to take her with him. So he placed her upon his horse and bade the old folks farewell for the time being, with many sincere expressions of gratitude. "Honored sir," the father made answer, "it is we, and not you, who have reason for gratitude. We are sure that you will be kind to our girl, and we have no fears for her sake." Here, in the Japanese original, there is a queer break in the natural course of the narration, which therefrom remains curiously inconsistent. Nothing further is said about the mother of Tomotada, or about the parents of Aoyagi, or about the daimyo of Noto. Evidently, the writer wearied of his work at this point, and hurried the story, very carelessly, to its startling end. I am not able to supply his omissions, or to repair his faults of construction, but I must venture to put in a few explanatory details, without which the rest of the tale would not hold together. It appears that Tomotada rashly took Aoyagi with him to Kyoto, and so got into trouble, but we are not informed as to where the couple lived afterwards. Now, a samurai was not allowed to marry without the consent of his lord, and Tomotada could not expect to obtain this sanction before his mission had been accomplished. He had reason, under such circumstances, to fear that the beauty of Aoyagi might attract dangerous attention, and that means might be devised of taking her away from him. In Kyoto, he therefore tried to keep her hidden from curious eyes, but a retainer of Lord Hosokawa one day caught sight of Aoyagi, discovered her relation to Tomotada, and reported the matter to the daimyo. Thereupon, the daimyo, a young prince and fond of pretty faces, gave orders that the girl should be brought to the place, and she was taken thither at once without ceremony. Tomotada sorrowed unspeakably, but he knew himself powerless. He was only an humble messenger in the service of a far-off daimyo, and for the time being he was at the mercy of a much more powerful daimyo, whose wishes were not to be questioned. Moreover, Tomotada knew that he had acted foolishly, that he had brought about his own misfortune by entering into a clandestine relation which the code of the military class condemned. There was now but one hope for him, a desperate hope, that Aoyagi might be able and willing to escape and to flee with him. After long reflection, he resolved to try to send her a letter. The attempt would be dangerous, of course. Any writing sent to her might find its way to the hands of the daimyo, and to send a love letter to any inmate of the place was an unpardonable offense. But he resolved to dare the risk, and in the form of a Chinese poem, he composed a letter which he endeavored to have conveyed to her. The poem was written with only 28 characters, but with those 28 characters he was about to express all the depth of his passion, and to suggest all the pain of his loss. Koshi osan gojin wo o. Ryokuju namida wo tarete raken wo hitataru. Kamon hitotabi irete fukaki koto umi no gotoshi. Kore yori shoro, kore rojin. Closely, closely, the youthful prince now follows after the gem-bright maid. The tears of the fair one, falling, have moistened all her robes. But the august lord, having once become enamored of her, the depth of his longing is like the depth of the sea. Therefore, it is only I that am left forlorn, only I that am left to wander along. On the evening of the day after this poem had been sent, Tomotada was summoned to appear before the Lord Hosokawa. The youth at once suspected that his confidence had been betrayed, and he could not hope, if his letter had been seen by the daimyo, to escape the severest penalty. Now he will order my death, thought Tomotada. But I do not care to live unless Aoyagi be restored to me. Besides, if the death sentence be passed, I can at least try to kill Hosokawa. He slipped his swords into his girdle and hastened to the palace. On entering the presence room, he saw the Lord Hosokawa seated upon the dais, surrounded by samurai of high rank, in caps and robes of ceremony. All were silent as statues, and while Tomotada advanced to make obeisance, the hush seemed to him sinister and heavy, like the stillness before a storm. But Hosokawa suddenly descended from the dais, and while taking the youth by the arm, began to repeat the words of the poem, Koshi Osan Gojin wo O. And Tomotada, looking up, saw kindly tears in the prince's eyes. Then said Hosokawa, "Because you love each other so much, I have taken it upon myself to authorize your marriage in lieu of my kinsman, the Lord of Noto, and your wedding shall now be celebrated before me. The guests are assembled. The gifts are ready." At a signal from the Lord, the sliding screens concealing a further apartment were pushed open, and Tomotada saw there many dignitaries of the court assembled for the ceremony, and Aoyagi awaiting him in bride's apparel. Thus was she given back to him, and the wedding was joyous and splendid, and precious gifts were made to the young couple by the prince and by the members of his household. For 5 happy years after that wedding, Tomotada and Aoyagi dwelt together. But one morning, Aoyagi, while talking with her husband about some household matter, suddenly uttered a great cry of pain, and then became very white and still. After a few moments, she said in a feeble voice, "Pardon me for thus rudely crying out, but the pain was so sudden. My dear husband, our union must have been brought about through some karma relation in a former state of existence, and that happy relation, I think, will bring us again together in more than one life to come. But for this present existence of ours, the relation is now ended. We are about to be separated. Repeat for me, I beseech you, the Nembutsu prayer, because I am dying." "Oh, what strange wild fancies," cried the startled husband. "You are only a little unwell, my dear one. Lie down for a while and rest, and the sickness will pass." "No, no," she responded. "I am dying. I do not imagine it. I know." "And it were needless now, my dear husband, to hide the truth from you any longer. I am not a human being. The soul of a tree is my soul. The heart of a tree is my heart. The sap of the willow is my life. And someone, at this cruel moment, is cutting down my tree. That is why I must die. Even to weep were now beyond my strength. Quickly, quickly repeat the Mutsuon for me. Quickly." "Ah!" With another cry of pain, she turned aside her beautiful head and tried to hide her face behind her sleeve. But almost in the same moment, her whole form appeared to collapse in the strangest way and to sink down, 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 level with the floor. Tomotada had sprung to support her, but there was nothing to support. There lay on the matting only the empty robes of the fair creature and the ornaments that she had worn in her hair. The body had ceased to exist. Tomotada shaved his head, took the Buddhist vows, and became an itinerant priest. He traveled through all the provinces of the empire, and at holy places which he visited, he offered up prayers for the soul of Aoyagi. Reaching Ekizen, in the course of his pilgrimage, he sought the home of the parents of his beloved. But when he arrived at the lonely place among the hills where their dwelling had been, he found that the cottage had disappeared. There was nothing to mark even the spot where it had stood, except the stumps of 3 willows, 2 old trees and 1 young tree, that had been cut down long before his arrival. Beside the stumps of those willow trees he erected a memorial tomb, inscribed with divers holy texts, and he there performed many Buddhist services on behalf of the